And so now we're going to dive into spoilers for Tenet for the next few minutes. And that means if you haven't yet seen it and you came to listen to the Nolan, jump away. We appreciate it. Move forward. If you want spoiler-free reactions to Tenet, go to last week's episode because we have that in here. But now we're going to get into what we think works and didn't work about Tenet, and Gabe has something he would like to add.
Well, and just a reminder, we've made a commitment that moving forward, we're going to keep spoilery stuff and jokes and references to Tenet contained to this spoiler-free segment. And then moving forward for anybody, you know, who has no idea when a theater is going to open up or when they're going to feel safe to go, you can continue to listen to the show for the weeks to come and have fun with us and not worry about us dropping a Pattinson reference that blows the mind off of the whole thing or something. Exactly. Who knows?
Okay.
So yes.
So here we go. In 3, 2, 1.
Did you just flick me off?
I might have.
You had 5 fingers on your hand to choose from. It could have been number 1, and you specifically chose that one.
I think that's so personal.
So today I had the joy of writing a Tenet ending explained feature on CinemaBlend, which is why I was furiously texting Kevin, because Kevin got to go last night, and I just wanted a couple of things clarified.
I hope I was right. I'm still trying to figure it all out, but
you may or may not be. So the moment in Tenet that and Jake was saying this too right before we started, where I was fully on board with everything that was happening was when John David Washington realized that the person he was fighting in the hallway was himself. And that's when there's moments in Nolan's films when his lines sort of come together in a seamless form, and you realize the story that he's been trying to tell. Now with Nolan, he's always so many steps ahead of us in the process anyway, because it's his story. But when he lets you in, nobody's better at letting you in at different points in the story.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit like the Usual Suspects moment, or it's a little bit like the Sixth Sense moment. But in a Nolan film, you sometimes get 4 or 5 of those. and that moment when John David Washington realizes he was fighting himself, I was like, oh, this is just amazing. Like, I don't care how, like,
when he
what
gets
happens
sucked
with this
under
movie
the door.
From here on out. Yeah. I thought this is just, it's so ambitious. It's so smart. It's so intelligent. I loved every minute of that. And so it was fun doing the 2-hour conversation afterwards, because I realized just how many of those moments there were. And we were all pointing them out to each other, because we were like, oh, remember this. Oh, remember this. And that's what was so exciting about this movie.
And also, and the palindromes.
Yes.
I guess so. I guess, and I didn't realize this. I'm not smart enough to hear a word and realize it's a palindrome. That the Kenneth Branagh's last name is a palindrome for the company that was protecting the security company that was protecting the painting.
Oh, for real? That's interesting.
And the name of the painter of the painting is a palindrome for the word opera.
Is that Goya? Yeah, it was. Yeah.
No, then there's a different one. So whatever, Aparo or Aparo. Aparo is the name they kept having to use.
Yeah, the guy that
sold. Sorry. Yeah, so Aparo
it,
is a palindrome for the word opera.
Part of me feels bad for Nolan, because I don't know how his brain works. Like, imagine just trying to go through a normal day as Christopher Nolan.
You guys thought I was joking for the longest time. I've been telling you guys we weren't ready for this film. I literally.
But I will say. I'm not lying. I will say, I mean, brilliant. I'm not taking away from that, but he does have the benefit of, rewriting. So, it's not like he sat down and the first draft was this elaborate puzzle. He probably spent a couple of years going, ooh, but what if it was this? And that,
Especially this one in particular. Wasn't he working on this story idea for a really long time before he finally cracked it?
By the way, Sean, to your point that you made about the reverse fight, sorry, Jake, about the fight and then the reverse fight of him fighting himself. I have been watching the Tenet trailers religiously since December of 2019. Like I have probably seen each one over 50 times. Like I will. Lauren will attest to this. My dad. So my parents were here 2 weeks ago, and I think it was a week ago or so. And the final trailer came out, the one with the Travis Scott song playing through, which I really like.
Which that trailer shows a lot of the third act.
It does.
It's a heavy third act.
But you don't know what you're watching.
Yeah, you don't know yet.
But what's cool about that was I must have played that trailer 10 times over that weekend because it just came out that weekend.
Tenet times?
Yeah. So my dad texts me like almost every day and says, "Hey Kev, do you watch that Tenet trailer yet? Have you seen it yet?" Like he's like completely just messing with me. But the point I'm trying to make is I think Nolan's trailers are an extension of his movies. I think the trailers play into your expectations, and we have seen that shot in the trailer where the guy is behind the portal, comes out backwards, and then goes into the fight with Nolan for almost 9 months now, and I never once had.
Isn't it cool though when you realize like I've seen something 1,000 times and I had no idea what I was seeing?
I did not. I just thought that was a random bad guy just stuck in that portal that comes out and fights him backwards. The idea that was John David Washington the entire time is insane to me.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. I want to ask a question about that scene specifically. The first time that they get around to it and they come through the door, I have two questions about this. Robert Pattinson says, "What happened here
hasn't happened yet."
And John Davidson hasn't happened yet. Wouldn't Robert Pattinson know what's going on? Is that a leading question by him?
Pattinson is his character is kind of a guardian angel, I think. And as he's walking through the film, he already knows John David Washington. Now, he hasn't
been through that moment yet.
Right. So, but
because keep in mind, he doesn't realize that guy is John David Washington
until later.
Until he takes the helmet off, and then he looks, and then he tosses the helmet back. So so in that moment, even he doesn't know what's about to happen.
Pattinson knows the general arc of what's going to happen with John David's character.
Because you have to look at all of their paths as linear.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
but the big sort of overall point that I want to make is that everyone keeps talking about how this is Nolan's Bond movie. Like that's the big, like that's the company line. Okay. That's what critics are using. I didn't
get a Bond feel.
I mean, I understand, especially because I feel like Branagh's character is kind of a Bond villain in that sense.
Yeah. Sure.
But I mean, I sort of quickly referenced this before Gabe had a chance to see it, and then regretted saying it because I didn't want to spoil it. I think this is Nolan's Terminator movie.
Yeah.
Like to me, this is a much closer like interpretation to him doing Terminator than him doing Bond.
Or Back to the Future.
If only because you send somebody back. Like you're just hanging on the concept of sending somebody back, right?
Sure.
Sending someone from the future
in a way
back.
They're sending somebody back.
It's sending someone back in order to affect a person who doesn't know in order to prevent the end of the world.
Yes.
That's Terminator.
A little bit, yeah.
It's just a lot more layered.
Oh yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is.
But it's definitely a mesh of those concepts.
Yeah.
Still, it's still very Bond. I would say that this, with the way that it ends, this is like the Casino Royale of Craig's Bonds in that it's like, although it begins with him getting 007 status, I would say it's more like a Bond movie in that at the end of this movie, John David Washington becomes Bond.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like at the end of this, he becomes the guy that ties
apparently the one that the Bond film that he most looked at was The Spy Who Loved Me. Which
really?
I believe now I read that somewhere. I don't remember where.
See, that makes me want to go back because I don't know the Bond movies well enough to be able to differentiate that, especially the older ones.
He showed his cast Once Upon a Time in the West before they shot, from what I understand as well, which is there's so much structural elements that I'm just interested in knowing. But yeah, anyways, go ahead, Sean.
Here's an odd question. Do you want them to make a continuation of this story?
No.
So I'm of two minds about this because there is a part of me that feels like, especially what the last 5 minutes tells us, is that there are a lot more stories that need to happen / have already happened.
Yeah.
And and the thing that you and I mentioned when we were talking after we both saw it is that I really thought the film was going to go back to the opera.
I did too.
And I kind of really wanted that to happen.
But why would you need to go back to the opera?
Well, because then the movie would be a palindrome.
But it kind of is in the sense. So in the beginning of the film in the opera, that's when Robert Pattinson's character first saves John David Washington's life.
I kind of wanted a reason to have to go back there.
Yeah.
For some
reason. Here's think about it structurally. It builds to a point in the moment where John David Washington goes through the timetable, the cylinder. What are those called? Yeah. It's a portal of some sort. Mm-hmm. And then he goes back into the highway sequence, and then they have to go backwards into the airport heist. I get what Jake is saying, that if they go back, they should go all the way back to the beginning, which would be the opera.
Yeah,
and then Nolan's made a
yeah.
full visual palindrome.
The only reason they went back to the airport is because that's where the portal was. The opera didn't have
Correct.
didn't have a portal in it.
Correct.
I like that they
Same.
didn't, because I felt like that would have been, if they had went all the way back and it was like, ooh, John David Washington was there, it would have been cool, but it would have been
Easy.
so
on the nose.
on the nose. It would have been so.
That's fair.
I think that he still achieved that sense with wherever it is that they ended up. Like that, there's still a sense of like the way that the opera house happened, and like that was like a siege, and it was all this stuff, and there were the two different teams going on. Like I think that in a way it mirrors each other without it being like so on the nose perfectly.
I agree.
So Kevin taught me something today that I didn't know.
I hope I'm right about whatever you're about to say.
Well, I think you are. It's Robert Pattinson, or it's Neil, who saves John David Washington during the opera sequence.
Yes.
I didn't remember that.
It shows the string.
That's where it shows the string.
But Sean, I'm with you.
And
I didn't get it on my first pass. I got it on my second pass.
I didn't get it?
Yeah.
No, there's so much going on in the opera siege, you know?
Yeah.
You don't even know where to pay attention. There's so much stuff happening. And I'm like, how much of this is important? Because even in the siege, he's a member of a team that's there to do something different. And he's got to branch off with his guys to get to that person.
which mirrors what happens at the end very much,
Yes,
with the two teams.
God, it's insane.
A temporal pinch. It's crazy. And that's basically
so
what I mean by
the theory that I threw out that you guys at least entertained and Gabe
I still like
shot
it.
down pretty quickly.
I like it.
But, and granted, there's not a ton of proof. My theory was that was Robert Pattinson actually Elizabeth Debicki's son? And the thing that really that made me think that was granted, I've only seen it once. Kevin, maybe you can confirm. The last thing, or one of the last things Pattinson says to John David Washington at the end of the film is, "I'll see you at the beginning."
Yes.
And then cut to John David Washington is sitting outside the kid's school. And so I was like, oh, does that edit mean something? And then I kind of started thinking back to the whole, like, Pattinson, when they were going back toward the airport back in time, he was very much taking care of Debicki. And granted, I'm probably looking too far into this,
But John
he was
David
very,
took more
very
care of.
caring. No.
Yeah.
In that moment,
But he was transporting
when that
her
moment
and
when he like Pattinson is the one injecting her with the stuff. Like Pattinson's very like making sure.
I kind of love that.
when he says "I'll see you at the beginning," though, does he mean the opera siege?
No, because I think the beginning he's implying that they've had this whole life experience together, this whole like friendship and partnership together, and somehow Pattinson ends up there, and now we see John David Washington becoming.
I need
So
your
now
help
let me ask-
on that scene. Yeah, all right, but
But he'd
Jake,
have
good
to
point, by
like
the way.
be going through turnstiles and going backwards forever.
Yeah, because that is what I
breaks
think
my
is.
brain.
I think that this movie touches on a really interesting aspect of time travel, which is it doesn't happen instantly. Like if you want to go back in time a week, you have to live a week backward. Which I think is a really because all their time travel movies has been, I don't say easy, but just like need to go back 4 years, boom, you're back 4 years. This one says like okay, but you have to exist 4 years going back.
Okay, so then I want to ask a question, and maybe only Kevin can answer this Gabe, you just saw it last night too. But Kevin knew what to look out for. When John David Washington goes into the cave at the end and he encounters the locked gate,
yes,
one of Branagh's guys is on the other side of the fence. And what is he doing? What is he trying to...
He's trying to get the last piece of the algorithm, right, Gabe?
Okay, they're going to bury it.
Right, all of it.
It's
all
all
together.
together?
Bury it, yeah. Because then
Now-
you can hit the death switch and then...
This is the part I don't remember. There was a body on that guy's side of the fence already?
That's
No,
Pattinson.
Pattinson's body's on the other side of the fence with John David.
Well, it's on
He's
that
on
guy's
the
side.
he's on the bad guy side.
He's going backwards because he gets up and gets
So
shot.
that is Pattinson, a different Pattinson down. Like so, that's the thing. We could get a sequel because we don't know what the circumstances are of
that.
So
That's what I wanna know.
But
Yes.
that's why we would need a sequel in order because we don't know why that Pattinson had to come back to that moment.
Well, here's what I think happened. Well, he would have gotten
He
shot.
gets shot in the face.
So I think because he would the guy was shooting John David Washington. He needed him to live because he goes on to be the John Connor and set up all of this that eventually happens. So I think he gets on that helicopter, goes back, gets back in a turnstile, and then comes back in and then gets down there in order to do that.
Oh my God.
And then we've officially overthought
When is he
it.
Batman? Is he Batman anytime soon?
He's not Batman. He's Vengeance.
So that's between then and that. He does Batman role, and then he comes back down. He's got to check his watch. He's like, oh shit, I got to be in.
Sorry, Riddler.
tunnel.
I gotta get going. All right, so that's our Tenet wrap up, and we will again, like I said.
Are we good on that?
Yeah,
that?
I mean,
Was there
take
any
that
final
and
thoughts?
expand it by 2 hours, and that was unfortunately, Gabe. I'm bummed you had to miss out on it, but that was.
That's cool though. I will say one thing that I thought, and not to take away from John David Washington, because he is cementing himself in my mind as a brilliant actor in his own right. And after this, I'm just same as with Pattinson. I'm just excited to see what he does next. But I'm excited to rewatch Tenet because I meant to memorize the line because I just had a giant smile on my face when he's looking up the building. He's on the phone. He's telling the guy he needs to get up there. He does a line read as Denzel Washington.
There are a couple of moments in the movie where he says lines that make me think Nolan did not write that. That's John David Washington. And when he said like the hot sauce line,
you think the hot sauce
that
line?
is John David Washington. And when he says those lines, he says them. I think his normal voice sounds like Denzel's. I
don't think he was doing it on purpose.
And
the
so
one I mentioned,
but
he does it. With
Lauren looked over me and
flashes.
said that sounded like Denzel Washington.
Yeah, and so I think those are his. I do not think Nolan wrote the hot sauce line at all.
That's cool.
I think that is John David Washington. I think Nolan might have said hey. Say something cool, say something funny, and that's what he said. And not only did he say it, he said it kind of in his normal voice, and his normal voice just so happens to sound like Denzel's voice.
The hot sauce line's my favorite line in the movie, and it really is. And I know it sounds crazy to say that, but that line is so perfectly encapsulating of the character. He's just such a badass.
Yeah. There's the other one, Sean, that you pointed out when Kenneth Branagh's guys are kind of feeling him up to make sure that he doesn't have guns or anything when he's coming to the table.
Yes.
And he says something, so you got to buy me dinner or something first.
Buy me dinner first.
Yeah, where I come from, they usually buy you dinner first.
Yeah.
And when he said, the way he says it is in a Denzel cadence. There's no other way to sort of put it.
Yeah.
But it's
such a, just because you mentioned that, Kev, it's such a a line that sticks out, and I think it was in the trailer, but I think my favorite might be Pattinson going, oh, don't be dramatic. And then he says, well, how are you going to do that or whatever? And he goes, well, or how big is the plane? And he goes, well, that's a bit dramatic.
That's a little dramatic. Yeah.
I love that.
I do want to say one thing, because my initial reaction to the film, I was at a 4.5 out of 5. And again, we were still processing it, right? So when I went to see it last night, again, more like a little bit more on the relaxed side and kind of just taking it in, I experienced something so different last night because I already loved the film, but then the film just kind of became something more from an emotional core for me. And I just want to shout out Elizabeth Debicki because I think her performance in this film is so unbelievably brilliant. The way she plays that part, her on the IMAX screen, that character is iconic. That is an iconic, I think. And I think that she genuinely is one of the leads of the film as much as John David Washington is. They are both so important. And what I love about this movie is that Nolan has a tendency to make colder films. And we know that. I mean, his films do leave people cold sometimes.
He gets a lot of criticism for the way he writes women, too.
But this particular film, much like Interstellar, I genuinely found myself emotionally invested in the complete story of multiple characters. I wanted resolution on all these different characters. And for me, last night's experience just solidified. It's a masterpiece, 5 out of 5. I'm going again.
Can we admit though that she had she has not just the worst line in the movie, but one of the worst lines I've heard in a long time. That made me sort of go like,
which one?
Nolan.
Wait, I've seen it twice and I've never cringed at one of her lines. Which one is it?
I cringed hard. Sean, any idea?
No, I don't know.
When they said something, the setup was something about this would cause everyone in the world to die, and she goes, even my son.
Oh, yeah.
I went like,
that stuck out to me.
Okay,
what the fuck?
Yes, I do remember that line. You say it.
Like, if I were Pattinson's character, I'd be like, yes. Like, even your son.
Yeah. That's
she was
one of
delirious. She had a
that
bullet in her. Come on.
Could have just been handled with a great close-up.
Agreed.
And that's it. And she's a great enough actress to pull that off. All you needed was a close up of her reacting to that line, and you get.
Once you say it, I remember hearing that line and thinking,
listen, it's no solo name scene line, but it is. It's up.
You know what? Every time you knock the solo name scene, I'm gonna look back and go, even my son.